Hello, everyone, and welcome to State of the Realm, your weekly Final Fantasy XIV podcast. I am your host, Mr. Happy. Just kidding. Slyh, aka Greyfox. And this week we're going to be talking about story. The embargo has been lifted. We can geek out about the story all we want to. So, of course, with me is not Mr. Happy. Mr. Happy's absent. He's here, but in spirit. But for this episode, we definitely needed our lore correspondent, and that is Ethys Asher. Ethys,
hi.
How you doing?
How we going, guys? I'm great. I'm excellent. You thought you were gonna get away with no one doing like the Slyh AKA thing, didn't you?
Yeah. No nicknames.
You really thought you were getting away with that?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Oh God, please. Okay, go ahead. Fine.
So we have our co-host with the co-most, Slyh, AKA Slip and Slide the Fox.
I get a new one.
AKA, as the Ishgardians would say, thou art my Esquire Blue.
Nice! I actually like that one. Happy, you gotta work that one in. You have to work that one in. That's one I like. You are my Esquire Blue. Thank you so much for that intro. And by the way, how are you enjoying Heavensward so far?
Oh, it's amazing. It's so much more than what I was expecting, I gotta say.
Now we're gonna get a lot into the story, of course. There's so much to talk about, but first, any twist, any M. Night Shyamalan twist that you kind of had, any high impact moments of the story? We're gonna talk about them later, but I just want to get your take on what was something major that happened for you.
I gotta say, a lot of the big twists I was noticing, I did kind of see coming. Mm-hmm. The whole thing with Thordan becoming a primal. I mean, that one, we should have picked up on that in like 2.0. We've got this massive church, right, with people praying to this idol for 1,000 years. When I sort of caught on with that, sort of near the beginning of the Heavensward story, I was like, oh damn, that's I don't know why I didn't see that before. The origins of the war, I thought, was a really interesting one, because we were getting constantly leading up to Heavensward, particularly from Shiva. We were getting this idea that what we'd been told by the Ishgardians and what was sort of the accepted history of Ishgard was not quite there. What else was there? There was Nidhogg's eye actually being Hraesvelg's eye. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really interesting, because I remember when we were seeing the first shots of Hraesvelga, I was assuming that was actually Nidhogg, and people were saying, "Oh no, you idiot! Nidhogg's the black one. He's not the white one." Duh. I was thinking, yeah, but that dude's got one eye, and we know Nidhogg's got an eye missing. So yeah, that didn't really surprise me, but I thought that was quite clever. And I guess the other big one was probably Estinian turning, which I think everyone saw coming. Don't you think?
Actually, I did. Well, in the early phases, I didn't see that coming. With Nidhogg, with Hraesvelgr, yeah, I kind of agree with you there, because when we were getting a lot of the trailers and everything, we were looking at that dragon in particular, and we were thinking he only has one eye. That's Nidhogg. No, that was Hraesvelgr. And with Nidhogg's eye being a total lie and not his, yeah, that was a crucial point for me. One sore subject that we're going to talk about in a minute. Nanamo. Nanamo not being dead, being in a sort of a comatose state. The poison, it wasn't really a poison, it was just a glorified sleep potion. And
that was such a cheap shot. That was ridiculous. I mean, okay, fine. You can do that. You can have someone drop dead and then later find out it was some sort of comatose bullshit. But the thing is, we got this whole violent, screaming and gasping and throwing herself across the room kind of thing. No sleep potion does that. That's not how a sleep potion. A sleep potion puts you to sleep. It isn't incredibly excruciatingly painful. So I think that from a story perspective, the way they presented that to us was just cheap. I think with those kind of twists, you need to leave some kind of breadcrumbs, and they just refused to do that there. So I got to say, it didn't bother me as much as it would have bothered me if I'd been told beforehand, hey, Nanamo's actually going to be alive. Because when we found out that she was alive, we were sort of raising the stakes in Ishgard at the point where we had so many other things to worry about that it wasn't, I guess, such a big letdown. I don't know why I'm calling it a letdown that Nanamo survived.
Because really what people wanted, I think what people wanted was for there to be some kind of closure. They're like, if they're going to be dead, just let them be dead. I mean, understand that a lot of the Scions we want to see come back. We think we're going to see them come back. I think we're going to see Menfilia come back. I pray to God we see Mubrena come back. But I feel like it's not gonna, it's wishful thinking at that point. But yeah, with the whole Nanamo coming back, it's just I kind of fear that they're going to try to bring back as many Scions as they can, and I don't think it'll be good for story. I don't think it's good for the story.
If you had to choose one Scion to die,
to die completely, like no coming back from anything,
no coming back, and no explanation, they're just gone.
A lot of people are going to hate me for this, and I'm not racist. Just want to get that out the way right now, because I know so many. Papalimo.
Yes. Papalimo, because I am unashamedly racist.
You're a Lala hater.
Have you heard his fucking voice?
I've heard his voice.
It's like a cheese grater on the face. It's ugh. They fixed one of the other Lullafell's voices. Who did they fix? Tataru. They fixed her. Yeah, because she had that really kind of squeaky sort of chipmunk voice in 2.0, and they just gave her some kind of Cockney, I guess it was.
Yeah.
Remotely Cockney. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought that was much better. What did you think of the other voice changes? Because we had quite a few of them.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of people. They're hit or miss. A lot of people like Alphino. I didn't have a problem with Alphino to begin with. A lot of people say he's less whiny. I mean, that's just probably a story thing, but he doesn't sound as quote unquote whiny. So, Merlwybs, I kind of feel a little bit off about Merlwybs because I'm so used to the whole kind of deep voice-ish Merlwyb.
Yeah, Merlwyb was kind of weak.
Yeah. Other than that, I really didn't have a problem with the voices.
Alphino is an interesting one because I heard a few people complaining, not that it was bad, but that it was kind of jarring because it was quite a large jump. It was quite lower and more sort of self-assured and less, like you say, less sort of whiny and cocky. And that definitely is a story thing. After the fall, he's sort of matured a lot in a very short amount of time. Right. We've also got to keep in mind the fact that Alphino's growing up. And he's going to be, a year or two older or whatever it is, since he was at the beginning of 2.0. And they're probably going to have to change his voice several times to reflect that. And through expansions, we're probably going to see him growing into a man, which I think will be really interesting. I'm really interested to see where he ends up.
Yeah, I want to dive into Alphino in a little while, but before we do that, in terms of the story up to what we have thus far, how did you find it in terms of pacing? Did you feel like you kind of got lost anywhere within all of the lore that happened, all of the things happening at once? Did you feel like you kind of missed a step. I'm like, wait, the shit's happening too fast. Because
Not really. Not really. I found the pacing a lot. It was fast, and I can imagine that some people might have, particularly if you're skipping stuff, you would have, in the space of 10 minutes, gone, okay, what's going on now? But no, I got to say, it was much better paced than A Realm Reborn. A Realm Reborn has you sort of running around, has a lot of downtime, it has a lot of sort of just running around in circles and go here and go there, and you're constantly sort of switching your companions and the people that you're communicating with. I like the way that Heavensward, for the most part, it's the Fellowship of the Ring. You've got your party, you're journeying out, you're going in more or less a straight line, and it's sort of relatively fast paced. There's always something happening. There's very little downtime until you get to sort of level 59 and you have to go and do a whole bunch of the Google library. But I thought it was really great. There's a few people saying that they thought it was too fast. What do you think?
I actually think it was paced out just right. I didn't feel like it. I feel like there were certain, maybe certain points that kind of got skipped over. Like, when did all this happen? Why did all this happen? For example, the whole issue in Ul'dah with Nanamo, with the Syndicate. We touch on it for a second. That's it. Back to business. Like, are we really going to leave it at that? We're barely even touching this. Okay, everything's not just okay just because Nanamo's back. I mean, that's
not
good.
Okay.
It's not okay. It's not okay. I mean, first off, most people thought Lolorito was still a freaking sinister dude, which I still think he is.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Even though we kind of have to be appreciative that he didn't truly kill Nanamo. It's like he's saying, well, here you go. Here's Nanamo. We could have killed her, but we didn't. So, yeah. So that just really, we got to revisit that at some point. We have to come back to that. Other than that, I don't think there was anything too fast-paced in the story. It picks up a little in the end phases when you get to Slyh, when you really start dealing with the Garleans. And that's another thing we're going to touch on later, is the Garleans and how we didn't see a lot of them. We got a little bit of it, but right at the end, and we didn't see a lot of them. But going back to the beginning of Heavensward, we start off in Corythus, Central Highlands, and Alphinode's still feeling sorry for himself, as usual. So Hashafant kind of convinces us to kind of, pick up our spirits and move on towards Ishgard. And so we do. And when we get there, we are greeted by the voice of Edmond Fortin in diary fashion. What did you think of that tool? Using that to kind of push the story along. Because every time you visited a new area, you were greeted by Edmond's voice. What did you think of that as a device?
I thought it lent to the not so much the urgency, but the feeling that it was a sort of journey and an epic, and we weren't just sort of wandering around, kind of randomly doing things. I thought a lot of people were saying, I saw a thread a couple of days sort of suggesting, when is Fortin talking about this? At some point in the future, reflecting back, where is he then? What is sort of happening? I don't think that's really so important. I think he could be writing at any time. I think it's sort of somewhere at the end of Heavensward. But
I actually
really,
agree with that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting as a device. It started to get a little bit cheesy to me after the sort of third or fourth time you're sort of anticipating it and you're expecting it and you're going, all right, okay, here we go. No, I thought it was really interesting, I got to say.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you with where the narration is going to end up, because I think it's going to catch up in the probably final phase of Heavensward. It will probably pick up at that present point and will meet right where he is in terms of his writing. Yeah, I thought it was a good device. I thought it was a brilliant device.
Do you think we're going to
have
have a moment like Frodo walking in on Bilbo Baggins and seeing him writing it?
The obligatory.
Mom, what's that?
Nothing. I think that's how the final patch in Heavensward is going to start. We're just going to come in, like, just walk in on him writing this, and then that's where the story will pick up. I believe that's going to happen.
It was all a dream.
All the Durgans were a dream. So, yes, Durgans. We got a lot of Durgans. We got one main Durgan. We got one main Durgan. Well, two, really. Our first interaction is with Hraesvelgr. Now, this is the one we thought that most people thought was Nidhogg. I may be moving a bit fast here, but there's an ongoing war, the Dragonsong War. What did you think about the interaction with Hraesvelgr, him? Because honestly, I thought in the beginning, before any of this, I thought maybe we were gonna have to quote unquote deal with Hraesvelgr, but Lady Iceheart to save the day as the voice of reason, the voice of peace.
Yeah, no, I didn't think we were going to have to fight him. I actually thought he was going to be more useful than he was. I don't know. One of my big problems with the way the Heavensward arc kind of concluded is that we didn't really accomplish anything. We didn't manage to successfully kind of parlay and create a communication with Hraesvelgr, and we didn't succeed to destroy Nidhogg either. And we haven't ended the war. We've broken that cycle of lies and doubt and deceit, but we haven't really made any progress.
So you think everything we've done thus far in 3.0 has been for nothing? All the stuff we've done?
No, I don't think it's been for nothing. I think that we've I think even worse than that, we got more problems than we started with. We've sort of discovered all of these other problems that are happening concurrently that we were blissfully ignorant to.
And that's something I want to get into a little bit further with there were more problems than the Durgans. There was internal struggle within Ishgard. And you kind of find that out really early about how sort of corrupt the system is. You learn that really early through Tataru and Alphino getting arrested. For what? For what? Was it propaganda? Was it that they said? I forget what it was.
Yes, they were basically it's that Ishgardian xenophobia. You see it. You see it in real life all the time. You get a state of war that necessitates this sort of centralization of assets and centralization of power, and you have to come down really hard on any even sort of petty theft and stuff like that. And you get to the point where you get corrupt power mongering people that use that to push their own agenda, and that's exactly what we're seeing, and that's exactly the sort of ancien regime that the peasants are all about overthrowing. And I think that is a really interesting conflict, but it's one that I was definitely expecting to see when we got there.
Yeah, you can kind of see that. You can kind of tell the state of things from going around Ishgard. Going through the Foundation, seeing the condition of people, it's not that good. It's not that good. And when you're first introduced to the Knights, it's not a pretty introduction. The way they work, it's a classic. It's a really old system, trial by battle. Which I thought was kind of interesting. You had to fight your way out of guilt. Even if you are guilty, if you win, you're free. You're innocent.
Yeah, that kind of bothered me. I mean, we saw something similar at Witch Drop in 2.0, where the idea was, okay, if you're a heretic and you've partaken the blood of the Durgan, then we'll push you off the cliff and you'll transform and you'll fly away. And if you're not, then you'll fall and you'll die and you'll be one with Halone and you'll be one of the honored dead. And I mean, that's exactly what we used to do to witches in the Middle Ages in terms of, drowning and burning at the stake and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was more interesting than the trial by combat. I found the trial by combat a little bit, I don't know why it bothered me, but it bothered me.
A little bit
cheesy? I guess. Yeah, it's sort of played out. Yeah, trial by cheese.
Trial by cheese. It was. I did feel like it was a little bit cheesy. It kind of was what you pictured as like old school in terms of that time frame. Old school caste systems, quote unquote, and old school government. And it did feel a little bit cheesy to me. But you end up getting out of it because you win, because you're the warrior of light and you're protected by story. Of course you are. So because of that, you get an audience with Thornton the Seventh, excuse me, and he kind of lets you know how things are working. He knows that you know about the Ascians, and he's kind of trying to play the Ascians, sort of, but I still thought that in that phase of the story, I thought that he was kind of a double agent. He's trying to tell me the right thing, yet tell them the right thing, and it just, that part really confused me. What really was Thornton's intentions with the Ascians and with everyone?
I think he was being totally transparent when we talked to him. You sort of see in him this arrogance. You see in him that he thinks that he's got the pieces in play, and that his end game, which is obviously becoming the primal Thornton, is sort of inexorable, even by the time that you show up. And basically there's nothing you can do about it, and he may as well be transparent about it. So no, I didn't think he was really playing us. I didn't think that he was sort of actually working for the Ascians and just sort of trying to put off our suspicions. But that was really interesting. I wasn't expecting that before we went into Heavensward. I thought that he was literally going to be a puppet of the Ascians, if not sort of enthralled by one of the Ascians in the way that that Thancred was by La Habrea.
Yeah, I just didn't know what to think of Thornton at that point. I didn't know what side he was truly on, whether he was just completely selfish, whether he was for Ishgard. We kind of learned this further. We learned his true intentions. But yeah, at that time it confused me. It really confused me. And then the whole this is what I call the start of our Dragonsong War, because this is the first time we really get introduced to doing something about the oncoming dragon slot. So we get paired with Estinian, the Azure Dragoon, and
the other Azure Dragoon.
Because we're the Azure Dragoon too, aren't we? Yeah.
I liked it how we did actually get some references to that.
If
and that it wasn't just sort of ignored. Yeah.
So yeah, for those of you who aren't Dragoons, if you are Dragoon, you did your Dragoon job quest, they reference you as the other Azure Dragoon, which is pretty neat. I thought it was a pretty it made me feel special. Made me feel a
Well,
little bit special.
it would have pissed off every dragoon if they ignored that. They'd have been like,
Yeah.
why the fuck did I do this? Like, come on. Hello, I'm right here. I'm literally right here.
So we start off with our little crew of yourself, the Warrior of Light, Alphino, the Azure Dragoon, and then eventually we get our last key presence, which is the sort of Queen of the Heretics, aka Iceheart. That's kind of a motley crew there, don't you think? In terms of
Did that surprise you? Did having Uzel join us, did that surprise you in any way?
with the current company we had, yeah. At the time it did,
Really?
because you have this Azure Dragoon who's it's his job to kill dragons. That's his job. And you have the lady who speaks on behalf of the dragons, and the whole entire time they just don't get along. Like,
Oh, they were getting along just fine.
they were getting along, but in everybody's mind, you had to think, would you two fucking get a room? Do you
Exactly.
want us to just leave you alone? We'll go away.
that's it,
I'll
man.
go do hunts. I'll go do hunts for about 7 hours. Do you? Can we come back and y'all just be
Get it over with.
get it over with? But yeah,
Just come back and just you guys just smoking and relaxed, and we can just fucking get on with it.
But it was really that was the core group. You kind of needed Ysael to attempt to parlay with the dragons. We wanted to find a way to kind of fight without fighting. So we wanted to talk to Racefolger, and of course we needed Ysael to do that. So we end up going on this like Lord of the Rings style journey. And that's basically what it was. It was a Lord of the Rings style journey, and you got two people bickering. Alphino's trying to hold everything together, and at first he's not doing that great of a job. And then he kind of grows into it, and you kind of get to see, goes back to what you're saying, you get to see the character progression of him becoming a man. He's becoming more of the leader that he was supposed to be in the Crystal Braves. Yeah, there's a little bit of salt still there with the whole Crystal Braves thing. I'll get to that later.
That's interesting. That so you think that it's Alphino that's sort of holding the party together?
Yeah, I really believe that Alphino was the cement to this group. You did see
Because I thought that I was the cement. I thought the Warrior of Light was the cement. I got to say.
You were kind of. I feel like the Warrior of Light was kind of the support to Alphino. This is where I feel like you're on a presidential tour. You're like on this candidacy tour, and you're the vice president. Alphino, he's really on route to becoming Louisoix. He's not there. He's not there by leaps and bounds, but he's slowly progressing to get to that state. And I feel like when you were on this journey, you sort of saw him evolve from quote unquote the 2.0 whiny Alphino who lost the Crystal Braves, had all the chaos happen in the end, lost the Scions, wept about it, cried about it, oh woe is me, to he gets his ass up in gear. He's got a quote unquote primal and an Azure Dragoon bickering back and forth, and he kind of holds it together. He kind of holds it together. He takes charge. He in one phase where we eventually, leave Lady Iceheart for reasons we'll talk about. Yeah, he's just I feel like he is more of that leadership role now.
That's interesting. Because I agree that he definitely sort of came into his own. He became a lot more mature. But I feel like a lot of that was sort of surrendering that need to be in control, and that he'd gotten to the point where he's finally learned to kind of sit down and listen. And you notice all the way through Heavensward that we are constantly being referred to, something which has never happened before. Whereas in A Realm Reborn, we're told, go do this, go do that, go do this, and we're everyone's puppet. And, Gaius comments on that. The Ascians comment on that. Most recently, Ilbert comments on that and talks about how we're, just puppets of other people's ideas. Even Midgardsormr says, he wants us to take charge of our own fate and our own destiny. So I definitely agree that Alphino was sort of holding it together in a lot of ways. He was also deferring to us, and he was also, as he was making decisions, he was saying, hey, what do you think? You're the one with the experience. You're the warrior of light. You're the one who hasn't, had their shit fall apart.
So you really believe that you, as the warrior of light, because of what Midgardsormr is saying, you are, again, story. It's kind of story device that you, of course, would be the central plot device. But you feel like even still with Alphino growing, you're still the main focus. You're still kind of the glue that holds everyone together.
Well, I don't think it's still. I think that we weren't that thing in A Realm Reborn. I think in a Realm Reborn, of course, we're the focus, but we are not what is moving the story forward. We are just performing for other people. Whereas I feel like now we're the one that's sort of responsible for the ideas and the movement, and people are going to start looking to us as a leader among the Scions rather than just the hitman. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think we're going. That's where I hope we're going. And I think that simple device of having dialogue options for us every now and then, even though they don't change the direction of the story, it gives us that feeling that we're sort of being respected, we're being looked to make decisions.
And Shichiban in the chat brings up a good point. He feels like we're Alphinode's hired thug. And
I felt like that was definitely the case in A Realm Reborn.
In A Realm Reborn, yeah, I could kind of agree with that there. Now it kind of feels like, I guess we're equals.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, we're sort of on the same plateau. So we start this journey to kind of parlay with the dragons to bring about peace before any fighting comes. So the first dragon I believe we talked to is Vidofnir, female dragon in the Dravanian Forelands, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And if we've learned anything about the Dravanian Forelands and Annex Shrine and the Durgans there, one, they're horrible parents. They're almost as bad as the Moogles, because of the quest they give you. They're almost as bad. They're not as bad. Hell, even Vidofnir asks you to do something. If you can, and she wants us to get Ravana out the way, the Nath, the Lord of the Nath. So we have to go fight Ravana. And I feel like there wasn't really a lot. They didn't leave a lot of lore on Ravana. It was kind of in our way. I mean, how did you feel about Ravana?
I was pretty disappointed about the lore behind both of the new primals, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
We've been being told since like November that, everything about the primals, they can be different, they can be bigger, they can be better, they can have their own sort of character and motivations. And yeah, I mean, we saw that with Shiva, we saw that with Thornton and the Knights of the Round. I was expecting, and anyone who watched my super early videos on Ravana and Bismarck knew that I was expecting something a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more complicated from these primals, but they kind of just seem the same as, Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda, really.
Yeah, with Ravana, he was that kind of primal. He was kind of reminiscent of Ramu, where he's just there. You just make a wager with him. He's just there to test your strength, which he does. He ends up fighting Shiva first, and then you're next. And of course, he handles Shiva for reasons. But yeah, he was just that primal who really, he's not the same as Ramu. Ramu just didn't, as long as you didn't bother the sylphs or his land, you were fine. Ravana's he's just a bug Irishman. He just wants to fucking fight. He just wants to fight.
He's coming after everyone.
Yeah.
He is Genghis Khan. I mean, down to the throat singing. I know there's a lot of sort of, a lot of sort of Russian feeling in that fight and in that music. But I was looking at Ravana and the way he was sort of acting through those cutscenes. I was like, all right, this dude's Genghis Khan. And then I heard like the Mongolian throat singing, and I was like, here we go. The Mongolians, they're the Khans. Awesome. I'll party with that.
So he's a conqueror primal, basically.
Yeah, that's what he's all about. The Nath have summoned him as a means of extending their territory. He wants to. He sort of says something basically along the lines of that he's going to take over the whole world, and anyone that stands in the way is going to kill or enslave, and that's what they're about. And that's why, presumably, Una Kalhai thinks that he's after the Warring Triad as a sort of means to that same end.
And if y'all don't know the name Uno Kalhai, if you've done EX Primals, Uno Kalhai is the little one in the mask, the little dude in the mask that you see. We're going to talk about him later because we kind of have some theories about who Una Kalhai may be or what Una Kalhai may be. So we got some pretty interesting theories there. But you take out Ravana. You don't really take him out, but he accepts your terms of the wager, and he will leave you alone. So you go to Vidofnir, go through the area, I believe, and you get to the Churning Mist, where we do Mooglesward. Good old Mooglesward. And then 2, we end up meeting with Hraesvelgr. Now this is where really it got interesting for me in terms of
definitely
character progression for Iceheart, because we learn about who the original Shiva shacked up with, and we all thought, like a lot of us theorized in the past, that it was Midgardsormr. No, it was Hraesvelgr. The background from Hraesvelgr himself was that Shiva, her and Hraesvelgr fell in love. She had some sort of sickness, and she would die soon. So
it wasn't about having a sickness. It was about the sort of difference between their lifespans. It's the fact that
it was natural causes, basically.
Yeah, they used the metaphor that the life of an Elzen to a dragon was like a rose blooming and then withering within a couple of days. So that's what it was about. It was the idea that she was going to grow old and she was going to die within, a millisecond of his lifespan, and that he was going to be left for all eternity sort of mourning for her.
So the solution that she came up with was that Hraesvelgr consume her. Which I thought was really interesting. And of course he didn't agree to it at first, but he bended to her will, sort of, kind of, and eventually it did happen. But this is where we find out that that Iceheart is summoning the idea of Shiva. Not Shiva herself, but the idea of Shiva. And it was really big to me because I know everybody thought, wait, Shiva's fake. Well, Iceheart's fake. The Shiva we know, we've come to know and love, is fake. But no. When we talked about this a while back, like this past weekend, it's the idea of what Shiva is. Like when Iceheart, when we first fight Shiva for the first time, when we first fight Iceheart for the first time, her heretics gathered all the crystals, and when we fight her, she becomes Shiva. Literally, like, finding this out, we know that she becomes her idea of Shiva. Hraesvelgr pretty much nips it in the bud that he go ahead and says it. You're not Shiva. You're not the Shiva I know. And what did you think about that?
It was exactly what I was expecting. I was really glad to have a confirmation of it. As Ninzard says in chat, yes, that is the case with all primals. Is that you have an idea of something that might be historical or a part of your kind of local myth and legend. You have a strong enough idea of it, and enough people sort of concentrating their will on this idea through prayer or whatever it is we want to call it, that it creates this sort of ethereal coalescence and gives birth to this soul, which is sort of a simulacrum or a copy based on the idea of what it is that the original person or thing is. So the fact that the fact that Iceheart has the echo and has this really kind of, fairly complicated, nuanced idea of what Saint Shiva was, means that what is produced is very similar in character and in motivation, but is not the same thing. It is literally just it's a copy. That's the case with all primals. That's been as good as confirmed by Tiamat and by Hraesvelgr, because we now know that Bahamut was exactly the same case.
So, in a way, all primals are ideas or beliefs that people or the tribes bring into manifestation.
Yeah, so the act of summoning is, rather than calling it something and sort of bringing it here, it's an act of creation.
Okay, so from that, going back to the whole flashback with Hraesvelgr, after Shiva is consumed, there's a peace for about 200 years, two centuries. And then something happens to kind of be the catalyst of the Dragonsong War. What is it that happens?
What's the Ascians? Of course, it's always the Ascians. The Ascians come to Théoden and they take him aside, and they teach him of the sort of origins and metaphysics and the way that dragons work. So the dragon's eye is it's kind of like the Tupsamati or like Dalamud. It's this ethereal battery which over time absorbs ether from the land and the air and everything around it, and steadily grows more and more powerful as time goes on. So the older a dragon is, the more ether that this eye is going to contain, and the more powerful the dragon is subsequently going to be. So the children of Midgard-Zorna, obviously they've been around for almost as long as time, and their eyes have this incredible capacity of ether. And the Ascians say to Théoden, you can have that power. You can kill that dragon, you can eat its eyes, and you will surpass the limits of human power. You will become something superhuman. So eventually Théoden concedes, and he conspires with his 12 closest knights to lure in Ratatoska, who's the sister of Hraesvelgr and Nidhogg, and is one of the children of Midgard-Zorna. So they lure her in and they kill her, and they pull out both of her eyes, and they just sort of eat them there and then in this bloody spectacle. And Nidhogg is the first to learn of it and is driven completely mad by rage and grief and attacks them, and he kills Théoden and a handful of the other knights before Théoden's son Haldrath manages to kill Nidhogg and takes not one but both of his eyes, which which we didn't learn until much later. We always thought that Nidhogg had been left with one eye and that the Holy See was in possession of the other.
And that was I felt like that was a kind of a pivotal moment too, when you learn the truth about Nidhogg's eyes after fighting Nidhogg. You learned about the whole, not really fake eye, but it wasn't his to begin with. It was Hraesvelgr's, and he was technically left blind. So I thought that.
So this is the sort of great guilt and great sin of Hraesvelgr, is that Nidhogg will die very quickly without his eyes, and he manages to get back to Hraesvelgr, and he says to him, basically explains his intention not to destroy these Ishgardians, not to sort of just take his revenge, but to spend the rest of time slowly torturing them and their children and their children's children in this endless sort of siege and this endless torture. And he says that in order to do that, he obviously needs to survive, and he needs a measure of Hraesvelgr's power, and he subsequently needs one of Hraesvelgr's eyes. And Hraesvelgr, despite himself, concedes to that. So he is his accessory to what it is that Nidhogg has been doing, and he wouldn't admit that to us forthwith, because he was trying to place the guilt entirely upon men, and he was obviously in denial.
So you feel like, because I didn't catch on to that Hraesvelgr was kind of holding something back. You feel like he was trying to pass the buck on strictly Nidhogg?
No, he was trying to place it strictly on man, and conceding that what Nidhogg was doing was terrible and should be stopped if it was within our power, and that he wasn't going to interfere, but that ultimately it was Thodin and his knights that were responsible for Nidhogg's madness, which is true, as accessories of the Ascians.
So with the quote unquote power that the knights obtain, we find out that they're able to transform into through an earlier cutscene, but they're able to transform into something beyond what they are. And we learned this through the actual Thodin fight as well. Can you kind of explain what that transformation is? Because again, I kind of got the feeling that underneath the armor and everything, there was something monstrous within there. We don't know what it is, but what was up with the transformation?
Okay, so we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. It's not the original 12 knights that are capable of that transformation. It's the Heavensward of Thodin, the Seven. So what's basically happening there is, as we know, after Nidhogg is killed, the surviving knights kind of split Ishgard among themselves, and decide that they're going to build this new history, and that they're going to let this sort of dark and sordid past dissolve. And they create this new founding myth of Thodin being a prophet of Halone, leading down into the promised land of Kurthus. And Thodin and his 12 knights become saints, effectively. So they become objects of worship. They become the center of the sort of Halone Thodin cult, and the center of the Orthodox Church of Ishgard. And as we know, what happens when you're praying to an idol or deity for long enough, this same sort of ethereal coalescence takes place, and you have not a primal, but a potential primal, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So basically the only thing that's missing is the store of ether and the sort of summoning ritual. So Thodin the Seventh is the one that realizes how this has sort of incidentally happened over the past millennium. And he accepts the sort of help of Elidibus in teaching him and teaching the Heavensward how to make this transformation and how to make themselves avatars of the sort of primal images of the 12 knights and of King Thodin. So that's the transformation that we're looking at when the Heavensward are transforming into the Knights of the Round, both earlier and during the fight with Thodin. They're becoming primals effectively.
And what of the going back a little? What of the heretics? Because we did see the heretics as transform as well, not into sort of these knightly creatures that we know from the knights, but essentially they became dragons.
See, that's an interesting point, and this is the same sort of intellectual point by which the sort of lower classes of Ishgard will be able to overthrow the Ancien regime, is that each of the knights that consumed part of Ratatoska's eyes ingested a part of her essence. And that essence is sort of passed on genetically. Their children have a sort of little bit of Ratatoska in them, and their children's children, and so forth. And as it turns out, every Elzen in Ishgard is in this same boat. They're actually all directly descended from the 12 knights. So we've got quite incestuous civilization here. But what happens is when they drink the blood of a dragon, it sort of infuses within it, awakens this essence and causes it to sort of blossom. And they're sort of consumed by this sort of draconic spirit, and they eventually become, physically mindless servants of Nidhogg. So Nidhogg's main strategy through the war is not sort of wasting his own power and wasting his own sort of forces and dragons on the Ishgardians. It's in capturing and converting Ishgard's own children and transforming them in this way against Ishgard. So the bulk of Nidhogg's forces are actually transformed Ishgardians that are being sent to, kill their own children.
So he's basically turning Ishgard against itself. Fighting without fighting, basically. Okay. And I thought that was really interesting how really the Dravanian horde wasn't completely Dravanians themselves. It was Ishgardians. We're fighting against our own people. We're fighting against not. And I thought for a second that these were people. It kind of confused me at first because I thought they were Ishgardians, kind of in the same way as the cultists or the heretics were to Ysael, which they are. The heretics end up becoming dragons themselves. Those are the ones who are kind of not trying to bring about the peace. They're kind of loyal to the Dravanians to a certain extent, and we find that out once we get back to Ishgard itself. It's under attack, and it's under attack from the heretics themselves. And then we have to get in between both parties, both the Knights of Ishgard and the heretics, to kind of bring about the peace. And this is after, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, this is after Nidhogg. Lady Iceheart is able to talk down the heretics and say a peace has been reached. Nidhogg is no more. And they kind of seem dejected. Did you kind of get that from them? That they seemed a little bit dejected that there's peace?
They were confused. The thing is, the heretics, they believe in Iceheart, and they believe in her sort of mission and her motivations. They're being used by Nidhogg, and she's being used by Nidhogg because it's a really easy way for him to convert people and turn them against Ishgard. She's sort of doing the hard work for him. And she wants peace, but as we saw when she broke the first ward for Vishap and his dragon stand to Ishgard, She was expecting that they were going to go in and they were going to basically kill all the leaders of the high houses and just end the war. And then, the lower class could sort of take over and rebuild. They didn't care. They were just going for everyone indiscriminately. And that was something that she wasn't banking on. And that was something that she was quite naive about, because she thought that Nidhogg wanted to win the war. She thought he wanted to end it. She thought that there was an end game. And as we found out later, there obviously wasn't.
So, the war is kind of still ongoing, even with this quote-unquote peace, this temporary peace that we have with the, again, quote-unquote eradication of Nidhogg.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm wondering what is going to happen with the heretics, because they don't have a leader. They're
you find out later.
Yeah, they're sort of up for grabs. They don't have Iceheart with them anymore. Mm-hmm. They're still presumably dissenting against Ishgard, but they might be coming to realize some idea of the true origins of the war and what it is that Nidhogg has been doing to them. I can't help but wonder which side they're going to end up on, whether they're going to keep fighting for Nidhogg, whether they're going to turn against him, whether they're going to try to summon Shiva again. Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting one. But yes, as we know, with Estinian turning to Nidhogg, Nidhogg is back at his full power. So Nidhogg Extreme is going to be a thing. And
you honestly think there will be a Nidhogg Extreme?
We're going to have to deal with him sooner or later, aren't we? And he's got 2 eyes now rather than just one, so he's twice as powerful. Yeah, it was really sort of disheartening, a transformation, even though I think most of us saw it coming, is the fact that we really were back to square one. The war was back on, mm-hmm. and we didn't really have any sort of immediate plan to deal with it. Do you have any theories about how we might go about resolving that, whether we can defeat Nidhogg, whether Estinian can be saved?
I believe we're going to find a way to save Estinian. I think we're going to come to the conclusion that it's impossible, and we're eventually going to have to take him down. Now, whether we can remove the eyes once more and bring Estinian back to himself, it's kind of open up for discussion right now, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to be a fool's errand, basically. We're just going to go about doing these quests to try, well, not really quests, but to on this mission to try and save Estinian, and I think that'll be Alpha Node's championing that cause to, but he was with us before, we want him back. I can't, I feel like Alpha Node's going to feel like he's lost another scion in losing Estinian, and he wants to bring him back, but it's a fool's errand. We're going to have to fight, we're going to have to deal with him. I agree with you there, but we're not getting Estinian back. I don't think we are.
Do you want him back?
That's a loaded question. That's a really loaded question.
Look, how about this? I'll answer first. I don't want him back. I think he's a douchebag.
Even as a fellow goon, you don't want him back.
Never liked him. He steals my kills. He takes all the glory. And
are you talking about that one instance?
Yeah, I'm talking about that one instance. And he's lazy. He hasn't even upgraded his relic once. Like he thinks he's so fucking good, and he's there in his in his AF gear with his 180 weapon and going, "Oh yeah, I beat Nidhogg." No, fuck off. Didn't do anything.
So you don't want him back? You don't want him back? Oh, just strictly
just because he's a douchebag. Yeah.
he's an Under Armour douchebag. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, he's a scrub. We hard carried him through the area, and
Wow, you heard it first, ladies and gentlemen. We carried Estidian. Wait, first we defeated him. We defeated him, and we carried him.
Mm-hmm.
So we carried him in the Nidhogg fight. Basically, he did nothing.
Yeah,
he held the eye. That's what he did. He held the eye.
Yeah, he's a joke. I mean, he's got two fucking hands. He doesn't need two hands to hold the eye. He could have done some poking, but he goes, "Oh no, this needs all my attention holding this thing." Nah, he's a joke.
I'll agree that I don't want him back, but not for that reason. Not for that reason. So going to the because you are the lore person, and we've talked about several dragons. We talked about Hraesvelgr. We talked about Nidhogg. We talked about Ratatoskr. Obviously, you hear the Norse origins in their names. Can you kind of go into a little bit more perspective on where they get the lore from these names from?
Sure. And this is actually one that I probably should have guessed and speculated about when we first found out that Nidhogg was going to be the antagonist. So I think most people will be familiar with the concept in Norse mythology of Yggdrasil, or the world tree. So basically we have this giant ash tree, which is the cosmos, and the heavens are among the sort of highest canopies. And our world is sitting on top of one of the branches, as is all the other worlds that make up the universe. So Nidhogg basically sits below the tree, gnawing on the roots. And it's this sort of area that's sort of the deepest pit of hell that's reserved for, murderers and adulterers and liars and whoever else it is that the Germans hate. And he consumes them. He slowly eats them. So he has this very kind of, I guess, neo-satanic sort of vibe to him in Norse mythology. Then you have Hraesvelgr, and this is actually a sort of misconflation by Square Enix in a lot of ways. But basically you have this giant eagle that sits at the very top of the world tree. And this eagle is unnamed in the sources that speak of it, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. But there's another giant in Norse mythology called Hraesvelgr, which transforms itself into this giant eagle and is often conflated in sort of popular culture with this eagle that sits on top of the world tree. So for the sake of the metaphor, that's what we have. And Ratatoskr, who is the sister of Nidhogg and Hraesvelgr that Thor and his knights eat, is this little squirrel, this little gossip-mongering squirrel that sort of runs backwards and forwards all day up and down the tree carrying messages between the two. So that's sort of an interesting tie-in. And I think it also gives a lot more sympathy to Ratatoskr, sort of setting her up as this really sort of fragile and innocent little kind of creature. You know what I mean?
Dragon squirrel?
Yeah, dragon squirrel, that's the one. I don't know. So I had a lot of kind of natural sympathy for Ratatoskr first hearing her name and finding what happened to her, just based on that imagery, which I think is, the kind of thing that Square Enix is throwing at us all the time. And I really appreciate that stuff. I think it's great.
So in a way, do you kind of feel like Ratatoskr, what message was she sending? Like, what message do you feel like she was, if we're going to go off that kind of lore, what message do you feel like she was sending?
Do we feel that she was sending a particular message between the two of them?
Yes.
No, I think the implication is more that she's like the little sister. You know what I mean? Is that they are the ones that sort of command and they're the ones that have the authority, and she's just, some innocent little thing that just happens to be a terrifying monster. And you know, when you hear about Nidhogg being killed and having his eyes eaten, you sort of think, oh, well, you know, Nidhogg is this great big disgusting fucking dragon that eats corpses for all eternity. Doesn't really affect you in the same way, if you know what I mean.
Right. So, with our story right now, we know of 5 dragons.
Yes. Yeah.
Edgar spoke of 7. And go ahead.
We've got at the moment, we've got, now we should talk about this briefly. Bahamut, we were all speculating before Heavensward that Bahamut was going to be one of the children. Then we got that little poster of Midgard-Zorma surrounded by his 7 children, and people were saying, well, Bahamut's not on that, so Bahamut's obviously not one of the children. But we have Hraesvelgr and Tiamat both referring to Bahamut as their brood siblings. So we know that he is in fact one of the children of Midgard-Zorma. And
Tiamat.
Yes, and Tiamat's mate, effectively.
Free Tiamat.
Yeah, and my working theory at the moment is that in that poster we have an image of the original Bahamut and what he originally looked like that isn't quite the same as what he looks like when he's summoned as a primal. In the same way that we sort of see what Saint Shiva looks like, at least from behind, and she's not some ice monster. Shiva the person, Shiva the primal, they do look, you know, they have some resemblances, you know, they have the same sort of shape, but they are, you know, they're different. So we have Bahamut, we have Tiamat, we have Hraesvelgr, we have Nidhogg, we have Ratatoskr. That leaves 2. We can be fairly certain that at least one of those is going to be Shinryu.
Definitely,
100%. Given that we have the whole thread with Omega, which they're putting off further and further and further. But eventually Omega is going to show up and Shinryu is going to be chasing him down.
Right.
And that leaves us with 1. And I don't think we've had any breadcrumbs left for what that 1 could be. I might be missing something. No, Shinjima, it's not Vishap. That was explained as one of the lieutenants.
A lesser dragon. Yeah. Sort of a lesser dragon. So, with this 1, who do you think it's going to be? Because, honestly, I think it's going to be Yasmat. I think it's going to be Yasmat. And if you go back to Final Fantasy, what was it, 12? Where we kind of fought Yasmat as like one of the later bosses. The bit of lore that we get with Yasmat is one deity among dragons, one great worm to rule all the worms of the world. Now, I know Yasmat can't be put in that position because we already have Midgard-Zorma. But I think
he could have aspirations.
He could have aspirations, but my theory, the working theory I have with Yasmat is that Yasmat's going to be the one to break Tiamat out. That's just my theory right now. Like I really, in my heart and heart and soul say that we're going to get Tiamat free somewhere in the future. She doesn't want to be free right now. She doesn't
want it.
She wants to kind of atone for what all she's done. But I think.
You really think that's going to change?
Yes.
After 5,000 years, you think that's going to change in the next couple of months?
Yes, I think so. I wouldn't say the next couple of months.
What will it take? There's got to be a reason that we need her. There's got to be some sort of great need that she sort of puts her own kind of selfish self-pity aside. What do you think it would take?
It would honestly take everything to kind of escalate. And I feel that Nidhogg's going to be the one to bring everything to this escalated level later on in 3.0. Not anytime soon, but we will have a need for Tiamat. We will have a need for Tiamat, and she will be on our side. We will not fight Tiamat. She will be on our side.
Well, that's interesting. Nidhogg, Tiamat rather, when we encounter her, she does sort of speak of this this real tragedy that the war between man and dragon is still going, that they're still fighting after 5,000 years. And that's a big, big weight on her. So maybe stopping Nidhogg and subsequently breaking this cycle could be motivation enough for her to sort of find a new lease on life. But I don't know. I don't really see it happening, I gotta say.
So who do you think the last dragon's going to be?
I don't know. I think it could be Yasmat. I think it's quite likely to be Fafnir.
Why Fafnir?
No reason really, other than that in the poster we were given, there's a dragon among them who we haven't seen yet, who looks very much like Fafnir from Final Fantasy VI. Yeah, and Fafnir, there's a lot of really interesting things you could do with him story-wise, drawing on the Norse myth. He's basically Smaug from The Hobbit. He is dealt with by the Ring Cycle, Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle, for anyone who's familiar with that. So he's a human that's sort of tempted with this great hoard of treasure and sort of takes it, and in his greed becomes this dragon that sort of eternally guards this treasure until he's eventually slayed by the hero Siegfried. So I think there's some interesting things you could do there. Shin, I'll link the poster in the post show for you if you can't find it. So yes, I don't know. I don't know. I'm absolutely sure we're going to get Shinryu. As for the other one, that's totally up in the air. I don't have any strong theories yet.
Do you think there are any curveballs they can throw? I mean, we could, like, Shinryu seems really, really likely. Is there anyone else that could possibly replace Shinryu? Because they could really throw a curveball. And not even, I mean, if we're going to have Omega Weapon, we had to have Shinryu, but Square likes to change things up. They obviously that change things up a bit every now and then. Is there a placeholder for Shinryu that's possible? I mean, we're kind of running out of dragons at this point, major Final Fantasy dragons. Do you think they would introduce a new?
Yeah, I don't know. I think in order for that to happen, we'd have to have the sort of curveball that Shinryu is not actually a dragon. Shinryu is something else that's coming after Ultima. Yeah, I don't know. Don't have any theories on that. Do you?
No, it's just a thought in the back of my head, because there are some things that we get spot on. There are some things that Square Enix just throws a curveball, and we did not see it coming. I really want to believe Shinryu is going to be that dragon because of Omega Weapon. It's too obvious. It's way too obvious for it to be something else. But,
so that's why you're so suspicious, because it's like it's too
I'm
easy.
really suspicious about what they do to story in terms of the changes they make.
That happens to me a lot, actually, when I'm sort of thinking about story and I come up with a theory. I'm like, nah, that's too easy. It's not going to be. And sometimes it is. Usually it is. Sometimes it's not. I think it's going to be Shinryu, I got to say. Although, if you want a bit of a curveball, I guess, in a way, something that I was talking about before Heavensward, that I thought the Imperials were going to be the force that united Man and Dragon, ultimately. In the same way that the Imperials were the force that united the Eorzean Alliance. So we got way back, turn one. We get down into the first coil, and eventually we come across Neuralinks. And Alize makes this point that, as we know, the Garleans are trying to annex the coil. They're trying to, salvage what they can. If they find out that Neuralinking is a thing, that they can control dragons, they are going to go for that. They're going to throw everything they've got at it. We see something very similar happening in Slyh. We know that Slyh has the technology to bind primals in the same way as the Warring Triad and Bahamut. But we also have all of these facilities for controlling dragons and Neuralinking dragons and creating these chimeric monstrosities out of dragons. They're going to discover that. That is going to seriously worry the dragons, because they have some very fresh memories of Mericidia. That might be enough to motivate Tiamat to do something about her sorry state. And I think it's not going to be enough to turn Nidhogg. We're still going to have to deal with Nidhogg, but it might be enough to turn all the people that are supporting him against him and towards the Imperials. And we'll see this united front of man and dragon that's going to push back the Imperial threat.
Okay, so we've dived in a lot on the Travanians, all the Durgans. Want to kind of go back to the Primals because we touched on Ravana. We have Bismarck, but in terms of 3.0 and the Primals themselves, Yoshi was saying that the Primals could be more, different, more complicated. What did you think of the Primals in terms of their personalities? Because honestly, I thought the Primals didn't really have a lot of personality. I mean, if anything, Ravana had more personality than Bismarck. Bismarck was just a fucking whale that just wanted to eat shit in the sky.
Yeah, he was just a hungry whale.
He was just a hungry ass whale. And yeah, and Ravana, he's like you said, he's the conqueror. He's the Genghis Khan primal. Other than that, they didn't feel like the other primals, in all honesty. And this is gonna sound kind of ridiculous, but I feel like Ifrit had a little bit more personality than Ravana. That might be taking it a step too far, but you kind of get what I'm saying. He didn't have a lot of personality.
No, you're totally right. They were both really two-dimensional. I want to give Yoshi the benefit of the doubt and not just call him a liar for making that claim and then not delivering. So we know that each of them are aspected to do two different elements, right?
Yep.
And the implication that we're given by Unakalhai is that they can sort of absorb ether of these two types, and they can therefore feed more productively. They can grow more powerful, effectively, and that's all fine and dandy. But then we get Thornton absorbing La Habrea and making a very, very pointed and straight comment on the lines that primals can consume any source of ether.
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is. It can be an Ascian, it can be a crystal, it can be something from the eye of a dragon, it can be from the land, it can be from the sky, it can be out of people's heads. It really doesn't matter. And that's sort of interesting to me. And I don't know whether that's because Thornton is not of an elemental aspect. We've got some primals like him and Bahamut and I suppose Odin that aren't sort of aspected to any part of the elemental wheel. Does that mean that they can absorb any kind of ether, whereas the elemental primals can only absorb the type that they're aspected to? And is that the difference between a primal and an icon, for instance? Could that be what we're talking about?
Yeah, I kind of get where you're going there. I think what we're gonna start to see with more primals when we get newer primals is you're going to start to see them shy away from each primal having a specific, elemental ability to something like where Bismarck has wind, lightning, and water, and Ravana has earth and fire, but still we're kind of running out of elements. We still, you can't really reuse all the elements. We're running out of stuff to give them.
I think you can reuse elements, definitely. I'm not of the thinking that there is one primal for each element, and that's just like how the cosmos works, and you're summoning the spirit of that element. And if Ifrit is the spirit of fire, I don't believe that. I think you could have as many fire aspected primals as you want. I think Belias is probably going to be fire aspected or fire earth like Ravana or something similar. I don't know. I guess going back to the idea of primals being more interesting, more complicated, having a bit more background, Thornton and the Knights 12, I mean, that's definitely one instance. Yeah. But that's not really the primal having personality. That's the dude who's summoning the primal having personality and just happening to summon him into himself. So in the same way that Iceheart has got a lot of character, I don't know if that really counts. You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying in terms of Ice Heart. But do you think we're going to kind of see more stoic primals, more, I'm here, I don't speak, I don't say anything, I'm just here to fuck shit up? Are we going to kind of see more of that in the future?
I think we're going to keep seeing that until we start seeing more instances of people using their own body as a vessel for a primal. Because the thing is, your primal, it's an idea, right?
Right.
And it needs to be a pretty broad and general idea. What the Ascians are doing when they go to the beast tribes is they're taking the image of this, this deity, this old sort of god of theirs, and they're firing the beast tribe up and getting them into this really sort of aggressive and violent fervor towards the Allied states or towards the Garlean invaders. So the primal that they produce is very sort of single track, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's all about, it's just violence. That's sort of it in a nutshell. And if you had a group of beast tribes that sat down with like a really kind of complicated philosophical discussion about what it is that this primal was and what it is that they wanted, and they all had this really clear idea of its motivations being kind of really complicated and nuanced, and then they summoned it, then we see an interesting primal. But that's not what's happening. That's not what the Ascians are allowing to happen. The closest we saw to that is Ramuh, where the Ascians sort of tried to produce this really aggressive primal, but the sylphs are so disinclined to violence that it sort of worked a little bit differently, but kind of not at the same time. You know what I mean?
Right. So do you think that the method of summoning kind of you get what you put in? Does it kind of work like that with
yeah,
Shiva?
it's literally you get what you wish for. It is literally that. Because it's that simple.
You had, like with Shiva, with Iceheart, you had a bunch of heretics with I guess this quote unquote mindset that just put all these crystals into play, gathered all these crystals, and then they got Shiva from Iceheart. I don't want to go too far ahead with Alexander yet. We'll talk about Alexander way down the line. We need to get a little bit more FaceTime with Alexander, because right now I'm skipping scenes. I'm just going to be totally honest. But
I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil any.
Most of the chat haven't seen too much.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about Alexander just yet. We'll say that for a future episode. But the Vanu. I felt like a lot was missing in terms of how Bismarck was summoned with the Vanu. That kind of confused me there with he's just there. There really wasn't a summon, even though in that fight you do see Vanu there. I mean, what did you think about that?
I found that pretty interesting. I mean, from both of the new beast tribes, we do get an account of this mythological figure. The Vanu have got this idea of this flying whale that used to live in the sea and is sort of constantly pining to return there. We didn't see the summoning. I assume that the summoning must have already happened.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is we didn't really have any explicit Ascian involvement with the Vanu or the Nath. And we had Uno-Kalhai later telling us that he didn't think that the Ascians actually inspired these summonings. I don't know if I believe him. I'm not convinced that Uno-Kalhai is not himself an Ascian or somehow in league with the Ascians. But it's an interesting point that the motivations for these summonings do seem to be slightly different, and we know nothing about them.
And while we're on the subject of Uno-Kalhai, want to talk about that for a minute, because sure. after we get through story and everything, and we want to do our EX quest, we have to talk to Uno-Kalhai. Mysterious little creature. He's a dude. He's a dude, basically. I think he is. But we don't know exactly what he is. He kind of looks along the lines of an Ascian, but I don't think he is. I don't think he's in league with the Ascians. What are your theories on what Unakalhai is, who he's aligned with, and what is his purpose? Because I think we kind of have the same theory on this one.
Yeah, I think we have similar ideas, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm pretty sure Mr. Happy thinks he's an Allergan, which I think is pretty compelling. Being some kind of Allergan clone, I think that's really interesting. He, as Gisela says, he might be a lackey of Elidibus. He might even be sort of a reborn La Habrea or something like that, in the way that we get, the little reborn Midgard Stormer. I don't think that that's going to be it, but that's a possibility. I'm willing to concede that that's a possibility.
What, the La Habrea possibility?
Yes, I mean, it's possible.
So soon?
It's possible. I don't want it to be possible, but it is possible.
Well, I don't think. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I don't think it's possible. I mean, I don't think it's even a possibility for him to be La Habrea coming back so soon.
Yeah, it would be very sudden. Yeah. Maybe even Nabriales or something like that.
Right.
But I think the possibility is definitely there that he's either an Ascian or sort of a kind of juvenile, somehow survived, reborn Ascian. Shinjima makes a good point. He's hiding his face. He's hiding his eyes. That is something that an Allergan would do. It's something obviously that an Ascian would do. It's something that an Allergan would do. It's something that a Garlean would do. He could be a Garlean. That could be one of the reasons why he has privy knowledge of Azislar and the sort of working knowledge that the Garleans have of Allergan tech. He could be another Garlean. That's a possibility. What do you think? What do you think is the most likely, Slyh?
Honestly, the Allergan perspective is the most likely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We haven't seen a lot from the Allergans, and now that we are in quote unquote Allergan territory, aka Azisla, we're gonna kind of start to see more involvement from or a few Allergans. I don't think Unakalhai is the only one. We're gonna see more. That is if he is Allergan.
Gisela, you're right that Unakalhai in the Serpentis constellation refers to the two stars that make up the serpent's eyes. And that's an interesting image, and that's a very kind of I don't know what to say about that. You've got all that imagery that's sort of attached to a snake and a snake's eyes, which sort of makes him seem like some kind of secret antagonist, or he has some kind of poisonous agenda. But yeah, I really don't know.
If we want to go that far, do you want to say that he is in league with a Dravanian?
I had this thought, again, talking about Fafnir and how Fafnir in Norse mythology was originally a human that was transformed into a dragon, that maybe this Unakalhai is actually one of the dragons taking human form. Maybe it's Fafnir taking human form and wanting to help us and wanting to sort of forward our own agenda without sort of playing his hand.
Yeah, I just like with the whole symbolism, I just feel like the possibility of him being in league with one of the remaining dragons kind of can come into play. Even though I really think the Allergan theory is a little bit more
yeah, I agree with that.
Believable. So one thing that we did kind of touch on here or there that I want to kind of talk about now is the Garlean presence. We didn't see a lot of the Garlean presence until right at the end, and we kind of got a few revelations too. Well, not really like game-breaking revelations, but this was a small one for me. Lucia, that's the first one I want to talk about. Lucia is the sister of Livia Saz Junius, and you kind of could get that from the Magitech armor that she uses. First off, why did she have a Magitech armor?
When I first saw that, I was going, "Oh God, it's Livia. Oh God, there's going to be a massive plot hole here," because obviously it's only like a couple of years since Livia disappeared, and Lucia is supposed to be some long-serving knight. I mean, that's obviously a Chekhov's gun of some kind that's going to lead into something else.
Right.
But at the moment, we don't really have anything for it, any context for it. It doesn't really have much significance at the moment.
Yeah, I really honestly thought that kind of blew my mind because, yeah, like you said, we didn't hear from Livia for a while, and then just all of a sudden, hey, I'm a Garlean. My mouth was ajar for about a few minutes, but going to the real Garlean threat and their appearance in Az's Law. How much of Az's Law do you think they're going to annex? Because that ship is kind of the same size, if not bigger, than the Agrius. I mean, they're really trying to make some changes in the Az's Law. And what changes do you think they're going to make in Az's Law?
Well, like I said before, I think the sort of stakes for much of the Heavensward series moving forward is going to be based on the Garland's movements in Az's Law. It's going to be what kind of facilities they can take control of and what kind of secrets that they will therefore be able to start developing for themselves. I think that we might even, I haven't done this yet, but this might be something interesting to do, is if we actually go to Az's Law and look at the geography of the place and the proximity of where they've landed and where they're kind of setting up, and what facilities are nearby and what those facilities might do. Those might be the things that we have to deal with first. But I think obviously Galvus is going after the Warring Triad, and he wants to discover how to sort of keep primals in this stasis and sort of destroy the cycle rather than having to defeat them over and over and over and over again. Similar thing to Dalmud, similar thing to Ultimate Weapon. But like I said before, I think it's going to be coming across the Dragon neural linking technology that is really going to raise the stakes and is going to give us a reason to sort of put our differences aside and turn to the real threat.
Yeah,
so I think that's where that's going.
I kind of agree with you there, but here's one thing that that really irks me about this. We have a new quote-unquote Legatus. He's not Gaius. He is nowhere near Gaius.
No, Gaius was Darth Vader, and this guy is, I don't know, he's not even Count Dooku. I don't want to say. It's like, what is he? It's I hate to say it because the voice actor, he's a good voice actor. He has a good voice. He has a very interesting voice. I'm not sure that it was well cast. He just doesn't sound threatening. I mean, he's doing threatening things. He absolutely fucks up Shiva, and you know, he's a more interesting fight than Gaius ever was, but there's just something about him that you just can't take seriously.
Yeah, I just don't get the same level of threat that I did with Gaius.
Donnie has it absolutely right. Seems more like a lapdog bodyguard.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
He doesn't have that sort of aura of command and respect that Gaius had. And I put a lot of that down to the voice work, I gotta say.
So you're blaming his less threatening nature from his voice.
Well, I think a lot of Gaius's character was in his voice, I gotta say. I think he was fantastic. I mean, he even sounded like Darth Vader.
I think he sounded a lot like Darth Vader.
He sounded like Darth Vader.
I mean, he had that, you know, aura like Darth Vader, but he didn't sound like Darth Vader.
Yeah, and the bottle opener helmet. A lot of people have been noticing that he looks a lot like oh, what's his name? The antagonist from Final Fantasy IV.
Not
Cecil's brother.
not X-Death, but
Yeah, right? It's just
Golbez.
Golbez, thank
Yeah,
you.
Golbez.
Yes, Golbez. He
does
looks
kinda,
a lot like Golbez.
He does kind of
Yeah.
look like Golbez, but Golbez was huge, like big. Golbez
Yeah,
was small.
Golbez was a lot bigger.
He
But I
was
think it's
small.
interesting that like Balezar and Darnus, they had a bit more of a look like the judges. Whereas I'm definitely getting a Golbez vibe from this one. I think it's interesting. We just got like a million people in the chat saying Golbez. Thanks, guys.
So, what can we do about the Garlean presence? What are we going to have to do about the Garlean presence? What are we going to have to do about the Gracian?
Well, the Gracian, we get from the sightseeing log that what's actually happened to the Gracian is that all of the engines are just completely fucked. They're just all frozen over in like mixes thick of ice. So the Gracian is very much grounded for now, and they can probably pass that a couple of patches down before we need to start worrying about them having that operational again. So what we've got to do for now is to basically hold the line and stop the Garleans pushing much further. And we're at a huge advantage given that we're sort of tapped into the matrix. We kind of have some sort of communication with and control over the defense systems of Azizlar. So I think that for the time being, we can probably let Azizlar defend itself. But there is going to be soon a mounting sense of urgency. So I don't know. Do you have any theories there?
We have Gilly. Gilly can defend Azizlar. all the orbs will defend Azizlar by itself. Nah. Yeah, I don't know how we can. Yeah, I kind of feel like we'll just put Azizlar in its state of self-defense. I mean, and kind of seriously, I think we will rely on quote unquote Gilly and the rest of the orbs to kind of defend.
What did you think of that? They came across as really kind of cheesy and almost claptrap. And just thinking back to like our early encounters with Allergan's defense systems in turn 1 and turn 2, and just how threatening they were, just how mindless and cold and threatening they were. I don't know. I felt like the whole Gilly thing was a bit
claptrappy.
Yeah,
Loaderbot.
pretty much in a word. Yeah, gotta say.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of. They kind of played down Gilly to where he was just less threatening. He was more of comic relief, if we want to call it he. It doesn't feel like the Coil we knew, where you had
all the side quests in Azizlar are the same. They just feel kind of silly.
Yeah, they kind of personify all the ADS spheres and everything. It kind of
which doesn't seem like the Allergans. You don't think the Allergans would create these sort of quirky, human-like ADS.
Do you kind of think that's our fault with Wedge? Bringing Wedge in and just kind of letting him, turn it into something we can relate to? You kind of feel like it's our fault?
Wedge gave it a name, an agenda, but you speak to the other unnamed nodes around Azizlar, and they're all pretty similar. They're pretty silly.
So Azizlar is just a weaker, I wouldn't say weaker version of Coil, because it's the same. It's Allergan influence. So why would one be heightened, whereas the other kind of, I wouldn't say the source, but this is an Allergan land. This is an Allergan inspired. This is an Allergan facility. Why would it not be just as threatening as all the ADSs where Coil was, where everything was set up? Why wouldn't it be that threatening?
Well, the coils are they're warships. They're a group of warships packed into a ball with an Elder Primal at the center. It is a defensive structure. As a Slyth, it's kind of a bit of both, because you got a museum there. You've got, come look at all the wonderful sights of the Elegant Empire. But directly above the museum, you've got the fucking Warring Triad. I don't know if they're literally there, but I presume that they are literally there. And you've got a prison, you've got like a biosphere, arbitorium sort of thing. So Azazlar is more like a city, and less like a sort of singular purpose sort of defense system, like Dalamud was. So I guess you can sort of excuse it from that, but it did still bother me.
Yeah, it kind of bothered me too. It just felt too personal. That's the feeling I get from it. Yeah, it just felt so personal. They didn't feel threatening. They didn't feel like lifeless automatons, which is what I really expected them to be. Just lifeless automatons, just there to just do a certain job, defend as is law. No, they just felt more relatable, and I really didn't like that. Now, moving on to a subject that really got a lot of people thinking, and there were probably the same, like we probably got the same reaction, but the ending of the current story, what we see after the credits, the Warrior of Darkness. First off, why are we on the fucking moon?
Yeah, why are we on the fucking moon?
Why is it Derplander?
We don't need to be on the moon.
Yeah, we don't need to be on the moon. And why the fuck is it Derplander? The person we've been seeing in all these freaking cutscenes, I guess you can call him a placeholder. Most people call him Derplander. Why is it him? Why, of all things, did they choose Derplander?
Is it literally, though? Is it literally Derplander?
Do you think... It's his face!
I don't think it is.
It's his face!
Yeah, it's his face.
That's the face we've been seeing in all these trailers, all this game footage.
Yeah.
I don't think...
And
do you think...
that's precisely the point. I think it's the equivalent of taking our character model and putting it there. I think it's sort of a narrative device. It's to demonstrate to us that this Warrior of Darkness is literally the flip side of the Warrior of Light. It is the equivalent. He has all of the things that we have.
But why didn't they use our personal character model? They could have used R to say, well, like that would have been more.
Well, maybe
that would have been reasonable.
Maybe that would confuse people even further, and they go, "Oh shit, we're the Warrior of Darkness. What the hell?" Maybe they want people to think, "Oh, is it actually one of the Warriors of Light? Not us, but one of the Warriors of Light that has been turned, or is it something else?" And I think that it's a placeholder. I think that it's just demonstrating that it is the literal kind of equivalent. It's just the Zodiac side of the Heidelin warrior.
Because once I saw that, just gears were turning in my head. I was thinking back to everything that I've seen. Even went back and watched the disc that came with the collector's edition and all these trailers. And I'm thinking, is Square Enix setting us up? Were they setting this up through all the trailers, through everything? Were they setting this particular moment up? Do you think they were setting it up?
What they would need to do is have conceded before in lore that there is more than one Warrior of Light. And they haven't really done that. The 1.0, they talked about the Warriors of Light, but since defeating Ultima Weapon, they've only really talked about us in the singular. So if we'd escaped from Uldar with a party of other Warriors of Light, if we had it conceded that we were not the only one, then yeah, they could definitely go with the possibility of one of these guys has the whole time been batting for the other team. But yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think so.
It just... Of course it confused the shit out of us. That's what Square Enix supposed to do. Confuse the
Yeah,
living
it was
shit
another
out.
cheap shot.
It was a cheap shot. I'll admit, a
could've just
really
been a
good
silhouette.
one. A really freaking good one, but do you think that image will change? Honestly, a part of me in the back of my head thinks it's going to change. It's not going to be Derplander. I think it's going to shift towards us. It somehow, some way, the Asians will say, "This is you. This is something. This is what you could become. This is the opposite of what you are." Again, we have Hydaelyn, they have Zodiark. This is our hero.
How about this one for you? We know that Slyh has synthesizing labs. They've synthesized dragons. They've synthesized voidsent. What if Elidibus got in there while we were stuffing around and synthesized us? Is that a possibility?
How would they synthesize us?
I don't know. How do they synthesize anything? How do they synthesize
wouldn't we
anything?
have to be captured and put in one of the many test tubes in Slyh for us to be synthesized? I mean, how would they have done that?
Just got one of our eyebrows or, fingernails.
Elegant DNA test, really?
Yeah. That's basically what it is.
But that was just another thing that just really blew a lot of our minds and confused the living hell out of me. Besides that, we're now at the end of the story so far. We have a few loose ends. The heretics.
A lot of loose ends.
We have a lot of loose ends. What do you think? What do you think are the biggest loose ends, and what do you think is going to be done about them? If we're going,
we've covered most of them.
The heretics, the high houses.
Yeah.
One loose end that we really didn't talk about, and this is going back in the story that kind of happened in the middle of the Dragon Song War and everything, and all the parlay with the dragons, was us getting Y'shtola back. Apparently, we have a ticking time bomb on our hands.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So the deal with Y'shtola, for anyone who didn't catch it, is that we got an explanation from Carney Senna a little bit earlier when we were trying to bring her about how it is that the elementals sort of experience and sense the world. And being beings of pure ether, they're sort of privy to the sort of movements of ether through the live stream and through the world and through the land. And that's what they have instead of, visual sense and auditory and tactile senses. So what's happened to Y'shtola as a result of her time in the live stream as a purely ethereal being? So obviously she doesn't have a body there, and she's just this clump of ether, this essence that is slowly kind of being pulled apart. We managed to get to her just in time. So she's come back with the ability to do the same thing, to be able to sense things through the ether, which is sort of this kind of higher level of consciousness in one way. But at the same time, as she is doing it, her essence is continuing to degrade, and she's sort of falling apart from the inside. And that's part of she's lost the color and the sort of brightness in her eyes. And she's warned against that. The implication is basically that sooner or later, if she can't kind of reel herself back, if she can't prevent herself from using this power, it is going to kill her. And I think that inevitably she's going to be called to use it for the greater good, and she's going to have to sacrifice herself in some way well down the track. Which is interesting because we've sort of saved her, but at the same time we're kind of more sure of her demise than we were at the end of Before the Fall, when it was kind of still up in the air. You know what I mean?
Right. And that brings us to the other scions. We only retrieved her. What about the other ones? Moonbreda is wishful thinking. That's wishful thinking. I would love to bring Moonbreda back, but I feel like we're not going to bring her back. Even though I feel like Urianger is still trying to work at that. And
Yes,
that's another.
well, that's an important device. Yeah, that's a really important device.
Yeah, and that's another.
I think we need Moonbreeder to not come back, so that we have this motivation for Urianger, this sort of passion and this drive that leads him to do things like, conspire or pretend to conspire with the Ascians. He's trying to find a way that he can bring her back. If he actually achieves that, then I think he goes back to being a really kind of boring two-dimensional character, which he's been for the longest time. So no, I don't think we'll get Moonbreeder back.
And speaking on Urianger, why do you feel like that wasn't touched? We saw that at the end of Before the Fall, and we didn't see any interaction with him or the Ascians. He's just there. Mostly
well,
in the
I think
end.
we got a moment of kind of contrary evidence. I know a lot of people are convinced that Urianger was either an Ascian or conspiring with the Ascians. Mm-hmm. What we get is, as we're heading into to the Etheric Chemical Research Facility, he gives us the white aurosite.
Yes.
And he says, deal with those sons of bitches. Would he have done that if he was an Ascian? Probably not. Maybe he wants to be the one Ascian. But like I say, it does complicate the issue, and it is in direct discourse and direct conflict with that last scene that we saw of him, and it does definitely complicate the issue.
Yeah, I just feel like with the whole white aurosite, he gave us one. Knowing, I'm not sure if he knew about Igiorm. If he's talking with the Ascians, of course he knew about Igiorm. Then why did he just only give us one white aurosite?
There only was one. I think that was the implication. It was just the last one that he just happened to find, and it was the one kind of legacy of Moonbreeder, and the one thing that she'd had the foresight to leave behind. But it was interesting that we used it on Igeorm and not on La Habrea.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting too, because
you think we'd have La Habrea's number by now.
Yeah, La Habrea was the bigger threat. I felt like the bigger threat. Igeorm, we didn't know a lot about. I honestly thought that we would use it on La Habrea before Igeorm, and that kind of threw me for a loop. That really, because I actually wanted to see a lot more of Igeorm. I wanted to learn a lot more about her, because we've seen La Habrea has been there since day one. We know La Habrea. You've gotten to know him. We're not sure. I'm not even sure how many Ascians are left.
There should be 9, I suppose. I think there's 12 of them.
So we got quite a few Ascians. I mean, even though we just get rid of a new, one we just met. So we still got a few to deal with. We still got quite a bit that want to bring back Zodiark. So, yeah, and going back to the other Scions. What? We got Y'shtola back. What about everyone else? If we can bring back Y'shtola, I feel like we can bring back Thancred. Menthelius, up in the air.
Thancred was with Y'shtola. He might be floating around the live stream as well, but I feel like we would have found him at the same time. So I don't know where he is. I don't know where any of them are, but I'm pretty sure they're all still alive. I got to say, I think we're gonna find all of them.
I agree with you. Well, with the exception of Breda, fuck. But yeah, I just think
exception of the one that actually had some personality.
Yes.
Oh, she was great.
But I kind of I agree with you. I feel like it's really fucking stupid that Ida and Papalymo would die from an LB3. It's so fucking stupid. There would be no way. I mean, Y'shtola kind of brought down what was it, the underground passageway over them. But Ida and Papalymo, it was just Ida doing an LB3. She's not going to die from her own LB3. She's alive. They're both alive.
Well, here's the thing with them. If they weren't in the tunnels yet, they were still in the city proper.
Yes.
if they had the tunnel, the gate or whatever it was sort of collapse behind them, they would have been captured by the Brass Blades. They would have been imprisoned. We would have heard something about them by now. We wouldn't have found out where Ralbon was and not them if they'd been captured.
Right.
But at the same time, if they'd been buried and somehow escaped, you think they would have showed up by now.
I mean, hell, we did get back Ralbon.
Yeah. So I'd say if they did escape and they've been sort of on the lam, so to speak, they're probably going to be showing up in Ishgard fairly soon. And if they don't show up fairly soon, then I'm going to start wondering about that. And who else do we got? That really just leaves them in Filia, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think... I don't know. What do you think the deal was with Minfilia suddenly regaining the ability to communicate with Hydaelyn?
And ours took a journey to get back. Yeah, that was kind of weird to me.
Ours was suppressed, and Minfilia's wasn't suppressed.
Right.
Hydaelyn just sort of stopped talking to her.
And she just all of a sudden got it back. Yeah, I kind of felt that for her that was foreshadowing.
Did Hydaelyn just not have anything to say? Was Hydaelyn just like, you're not doing anything interesting, I'll call you later?
That's really technically what Minfilia is. She's just not doing anything. She has not been doing anything for how many patches?
Hey, she's Xavier, all right?
We're not going to get into this argument again. No, she is not Xavier. Xavier's at least more useful without legs. She has legs and doesn't do shit but get captured. And get put in S and M positions.
Yeah, I don't know where she is. Again, they didn't leave us any breadcrumbs for that whatsoever, which I think was a little bit cheap. Yeah. Because speculating is so much fun, but baseless speculating is, doesn't really get you anywhere.
No, not at all. So, with all the story, were there any other letdowns that you had?
Well, the big one was obviously the deal with Nanamo after screaming and crying and throwing herself across the room. Apparently, that's what sleeping pills do. I've taken a lot of sleeping pills in my time, and there are no tears. I fucking promise you.
I didn't joke.
Was bullshit.
We didn't choke off sleeping pills. They don't do that to you.
No. So yeah, I didn't like that. That was cheap. And it wasn't even because, like a lot of people are saying, that it somehow belittles all of the tension and all of the loss from before the fall. It's literally just that it was such a fucking cheap shot. I don't like having people pull that kind of shit on me. Another interesting one was when we retrieved the key to Azazlar from Bishmar. This is one that people probably didn't pay much attention to, but Ijeon sort of restrained us and took the key, and then just let us go, and they just left.
Yeah, you would think.
I feel like at that point, we were still suppressed from the Blessing of Light. You think she could have just fucking
tried to kill us? Yeah, just make an attempt, but she didn't. She just. It's like she wanted to see us later.
Well, I mean, it does sort of ties into the way the Ascians operate. They don't like to interfere directly, and they were all really kind of dissing Elidibus for interfering directly, because that's not what they're about. What they're about is turning the denizens of Eorzea against themselves and creating this sort of state of chaos without them actually having to do anything, because it kind of defeats the purpose. And it's only really when they're backed into a corner that they kind of attack.
And that's what I was about to say. You say that the Ascians don't like to get involved.
Yeah, but then
how many times? Yeah, how many times have we seen Hell Lahabrea? How many times?
Yeah. And it's difficult because you got to draw that line. And I think it's when they're sort of at threat of themselves being destroyed, then they're allowed to kind of break the rules. But I think that's part of the whole Zodiac mandate in some way, is that you don't interfere, and you don't directly attack unless unless you're really backed into a corner.
I think my biggest letdown of the story was alongside with Nanamo. Just I really wanted to kill Lolorito. I think we all did. We all wanted to kill Lolorito, and we just couldn't because we kind of had to accept the fact that, hey, Nanamo's alive.
Oh, it'll come. It'll come. We'll have our day. Rabon will have his day anyway.
Why the fuck haven't we built Rabon a new arm? We have the tools. We have the technology. He just has it covered with with his cape. That's all he has. We couldn't give the man.
Do you think that's the new look? Do you think that's the new look? Or
bullshit.
We
have
Sid.
Sid.
Are actually going to make him into Barrett. He's going to be Barrett.
He's going to be Barrett. It's going to happen.
Good.
We have Sid. But yeah, I think there were a lot of letdowns and a lot of cheese in the story. A lot of fucking cheese in the story. I'm still kind of pissed. Another thing I'm kind of pissed at is the fall of Iceheart. She's just gone too soon. That kind of hurt my soul.
Well, here's the thing. Yes, she's gone. Yazel is dead. The heretics are not. The heretics still worship Shiva. The heretics aren't privy to that knowledge about the primals that we are from Hraesvelgr. Mm-hmm. They could realistically try to summon Iceheart again, with or without Ascian influence. And maybe that will be Yazel. I remember at the end of turn 12, mm-hmm. Louis Slyh is concerned with people learning about what happened with Phoenix because he doesn't want to come back. He doesn't want to be forced to come back and be indentured as a primal. Now, he wouldn't know how that works, having never really experienced that, there being no precedent. But do you think it's possible that if Shiva was summoned back, that she still would be attached to the essence of Yazel? Or will that have disintegrated and will just be the mindless kind of primal Shiva?
I think we get a new primer to summon Shiva. I think we get a replacement. I think we get a replacement for what Yazel was. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to be the heretics just summon a new Shiva out of thin air. No, there has to be a primer. There has to be a new primer, and it'll be someone. I don't know who, but it'll be someone to replace her.
Why do you think there has to be a primer, given that none of the other primals do?
I mean, we just recently learned the truth about Shiva's story. We just basically learned the truth about the Iceheart summoning of Shiva, and I think because they don't have that knowledge, I think they'll find out some way, somehow. I think accidentally, but they'll find the heretics will find out about Iceheart, about Shiva, and they'll find a way to bring about the summon, because they know how Iceheart did it. They know how Iceheart did it. They're just going to assume that we just need a placeholder.
They're going to build a bicycle.
No. I don't think so.
We're going to build an elegant motorcycle. Oh, God.
God, don't.
Nail in the
don't. Oh, my God. No twins, God. No fucking motorcycles, please. Oh, man. Okay, so...
Right, well, that's the letdowns.
Yeah, those are the letdowns. One thing we haven't touched on were the dungeons. With these dungeons, we kind of didn't get a lot of lore, with the exception of a few. And I kind of feel like they shoehorned the lore into these dungeons.
Yeah, definitely.
There wasn't a lot in there, and when it was just for brief moment just to kind of say we threw lore in there, and that was it. And hell, it was so quick that I didn't even have the time to read it because, one, nobody's going to stop to read fucking lore. Nobody. I mean, you are the only one who gets lucky enough to...
I did.
Yeah, I know. You get lucky enough to kind of have people who just wait on you. I'll type wait, and they still pull. They still pull. I was trying to read all the books.
Pull, whatever. Let them pull.
I was trying to read all the books in the great Google library, and I can't because you're just already there and pulling. And so,
unfortunately, you didn't miss all that much. We learned through the sightseeing log that most of the books were actually taken out of the library during the Exodus, and that sort of I don't know what to call that section. It's like that sort of Harry Potter section, isn't it? Where all the books are trying to kill you. They only left one page there, and it was page 64.
That keeps trying to kill you.
Every book. So the demon book, it's the same page. It's 64.
Now
it's the one texture. Page 64 they used for that. They used for the last boss when he's flipping the pages. Every fucking page is 64. I've gone through that frame by frame. There's only one page in the whole fucking library.
Now with the demon book, I wanted to kind of talk with you about that because in that fight, my aortine's not good. I couldn't even pause it just to see what it was saying. Could you actually see what the huge aortine text on that book said?
I had to look at this a while ago, and it didn't really make much sense. I think someone tried to unravel it in a thread on Reddit. I'll link that in the post show if I can find it. But basically, it's either in Dravanian or it's in the Ascian tongue, and there's not really anything there that's particularly discernible. So. Yeah, the one page that we're getting, we can't even really make that much sense of at the moment. I need to go through and have a really solid look at that and make sure that is the case.
Okay.
But that said, I mean, we did get some tokenism lore from the library. We got a lot of stuff on the Garlean hierarchy, which would have been really useful for you a month ago in AOC.
Yes.
And it was really interesting that this was so sort of thorough. I mean, we got Zos, we know Zos. Ye is a member of the royal family who's eligible for the throne. And Weir is a royal family member that's not eligible. We've got Van, we know Toll, we know Sass, Rem, Quo, Per, Optio, Owen, in sort of descending ranks. Then we've got all the specialists like Nan, Mal, Lux, Kir. So we got the first two entries were all about the Garlean hierarchy in this sort of really dense text, and I was sort of thinking that was really promising. I think that's the direction I was expecting the rest of the pages to go in, but the rest of them were really kind of shallow. They didn't give us much. We got one really interesting one actually. We've had a couple of mentions here and there about the New World. About the sort of implications of this. It's America. We're talking about the New World in the same sense that the British were talking about the New World. And I don't know if you read it, Sly, but see if you can take a guess. Who do you think is the sort of Aorsian Christopher Columbus? Who do you think discovered the New World?
The Aortian Christopher Columbus. See, I didn't even know there would be a quiz.
It's always a quiz.
Always a quiz.
Just take a guess. Just take a guess. It's a sailor. It's someone from Limsa Lominsa.
It's not Miss Beard. Why do I keep?
It's Melvin.
It's Melvin.
That's where she was during 1.0 when we never saw her, and then suddenly she came back and she won the stupid fucking race or whatever it is and became the admiral of Limsa Lominsa. She'd been on an expedition to the New World, having all kinds of adventures there, and there's sort of these conflated rumors about a city of gold, which is obviously the El Dorado reference. But I thought that was really cool. And I think that we're definitely going to get something heading in that direction. We probably won't see the New World for a long time, but it's going to be an interesting sort of frontier. And it gives a lot more character to Melvib, which I think is, yeah, I thought that was awesome. The other one in there that actually really bothered me is we got an excerpt from an unnamed diary talking about Lady Amandine Dartencourt.
Ah.
And referring to the basically the void scent that they'd summoned that she was going to inhabit, and that it wasn't going to be as beautiful as she used to be, but it was much better than the mess of a face that she had. So that was interesting. But the thing is, that happened like a year ago.
Exactly.
And the library has been abandoned for nearly 3 decades. So how the fuck did that get there?
Somebody's keeping...
So people say, oh my God, it was the Sharlayans. The Sharlayans converted Lady Amandine. I'm like, what Sharlayans? There's no Sharlayans.
No.
They're not here anymore. Is it something, is it like a magical library that just like teleports all kind of material into itself, or...
That kind of sounds like it. That kind of sounds like it as the events are occurring.
Yeah.
As events are occurring around Eortia, we're getting records put in the library. Now,
yeah,
this
is really interesting. But
the one thing we do know is that we have people inhabiting the area around the library. We still the goblins were there, correct?
Yeah, they're not in the library though. They couldn't get in because of the sentinels, because of all the shit that we had to fight our way through.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting that the library might have a mind of its own.
Convar's right. The library is the Twilight Zone, straight up.
Yeah. The other dungeon that kind of had a little bit of lore, not as much as the library, was Dust Vigil, and this is where I say that it was shoehorned in, because you get the lore for Ulmeric.
Ulmeric,
excuse me.
Yes.
And it's just that little bit in that phase. Anything before that or after that, that's it. You don't get any.
Yeah, it's interesting. It gives us like a little slice of life as to, I mean, we know what the Calamity was like for the Laminsons and the Gridanians and everyone else in our alliance and the places we've been. We know what experiencing that was like for them. What we didn't realize was that it hit Ishgard really hard as well. Anyone who's seen or played 1.0 knows that the Coerthas Highlands were all rolling green hills, and that within a couple of days, as a result of Dalamud falling and interrupting the sort of ethereal flow of the landscape, it became this wasteland, and the Dusk Vigil was being occupied by, I think it was House Zemael. I might be wrong about that, but I know that Ulmeric was the quest giver in 1.0 for the Zemael Darkhold. So that's why I'm thinking Zemael. Anyway, they got snowed in. They got trapped in there, and they eventually went mad and had to eat each other. And now they're, mindless ashkin. And that's really tragic. And it gives us... It is definitely shoehorned, but it does give us a kind of flavor of what the Calamity was like for Ishgard. And the fact that they had to abandon the Western Highlands, not because of the dragons, but because it was just completely fucked after the Calamity.
Do you think we'll see more of that lore a la Temterra in maybe a Dust Vigil hard mode? Do you think we'll see it, or do you think that just was the end of it?
I'd like to see a Dusk Vigil hard mode. I can't really speculate about that at the moment. I don't think Ulmeric will come back. I think it'll be a different sort of line. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. There's one other dungeon which we should talk about, and that is the Fractal Continuum.
Yes.
Why do you think that I want to talk about that?
Well, one, when I rolled through the Fractal Continuum, Let me make sure I'm getting it. Fractal continuum, aetherochemical research. Two different things.
Yeah, the Etherochemical Research Facility was the story one. The Fractal Continuum is the what do you call it? The museum.
Yes. Yeah, there was a lot. Yeah, you saw a lot of plaques and information in the Fractal Continuum. Again, never have time to read it. I never get that fucking kind of time. But yeah, there was.
So
just
we got a couple of cool little things in there. I mean, we got a lot of explanations of they'd made like synthetic void scent, which is kind of creepy, and other chimeric things. We came across some mobs in there called Ixalion. They are winged Ixal.
Breeded well, not really breeded. I wouldn't say breeded, but created Ixal.
Exactly. So what we found out, we've got this Ixali creation myth already that they lived in this place called Eardlan, and that they descended. That Garuda was sort of responsible for their descent, and then took their wings for them. That they would sort of be reliant on her favor. And now we've got the truth is that the Ixal were actually chimeric creations synthesized by the Allagans as slave labor. And they were, their sort of crafting prowess and their intelligence is in virtue of the fact that they were designed to be like maintenance workers. So we have this new implication, not only of the founding myth of the Ixal, but of Garuda, who now seems to have been some sort of revolutionary or rebellious Ixal that sort of freed the Ixal from Azisla, from wherever it was up there that they were working, and sort of led them on this exodus down towards Girabanya and eventually the Twelveswood. Which gives us like a clear kind of historical character for the primal Garuda to be based on, but also just a really interesting sort of origin story for the Ixal, which I knew we were going to find up there somewhere, and I was really excited to find it. And I thought that they were probably going to have been enslaved by the Allagans, but the fact that they were literally created by them, I think is really, really interesting.
So by default, in a way, Garuda is an Allagan created primal. Would you say that? Would that be fair to say?
I think it would be fair to say that the historical Garuda was an Ixal, was a winged Ixal, and was a leader, was kind of a Spartacus, if you will, among the Ixal.
Joan of Arc?
And yeah, pretty much. And they escaped from Azisla and they made their new home down below. And then after a couple of generations, they went through this process of sort of losing their wings because they weren't using them, they had no need for them. We know a similar thing happened in Mericidia to dragon coels who were dragons, but eventually ended up kind of taking the form of these kind of scaled coels. So something similar happened there. And then she sort of passed down in legend as their sort of Jesus, basically, their savior, their God. And then the Assyrians took this pre-existing image and sort of twisted it into their own sort of violence, basically what it is that they wanted the Ixal to summon. And that's what Garuda the Primal is this sort of pale simulacrum of what was at some point this great sort of savior and hero.
So that probably is the only other dungeon with lore around that we do have, because it was kind of limited in this patch.
Yeah.
From the map, because of flying and because of how big the maps are, you kind of get these open areas in the map where you see something that could be used. You see like something like a hidden access panel, or just a bunch of open area that could lead to something else. Do you feel like we'll get new dungeons out of these places? And can you kind of pick up from the lore of the area what these dungeons might be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were all doing the same thing during A Realm Reborn. We were looking at the maps and identifying potential entrances of new dungeons and potential entrances of new turns of coil. So the two that I've noticed particularly in the last couple of days is one in the hinterlands. It's called the Saint Mossian Arboretum, and it's basically this. What's basically what it sounds like. You've probably all seen the building. It's got like a tree like sprouting out of the top of it. It's all overgrown. It's basically a catalog of plants that the Charlands collected from all across the realm and all across the world. And we know from the sightseeing log, apparently, that since they abandoned it, it's kind of gone wild, and there's sort of all kinds of beasties and probably Rafflesias in there, unfortunately.
Really? We're going to see more Rafflesias? How many Rafflesias have we seen?
Everyone loves Rafflesia. The 90% of the people that have done any Savage, they just did Rafflesia and they stopped there. So that shows you that they fucking love Rafflesia. Going to be getting lots of that. So yeah, we're gonna get a dungeon there, I think. The second one, I know there was a bunch of them in Slyh, but the one that particularly interests me is the Aqueduct. Now we see in Slyh, on top of all the Allergan stuff, we've got older ruins. We've got these ancient cobbled ruins that the Allergan stuff is built on top of. And this is, it's either very, very early sort of developing Allergan stuff from the third astral age, or it's an older civilization still. Maybe one of the civilizations that called upon at least one of the warring triad. But there's definitely some other ruins there that are not Allergan in the sense that we know the Allergans, and I want to explore them. And I think that the Aqueduct is as good an excuse as any. And then there's just a bunch of really obvious ones around Slyh that people have already noticed. The Gratian will probably end up being a dungeon at some point. We'll probably find out that they're about to finish fixing it. We'll have to go in and dismantle it and fight Gallus again or something like that. What about you, Slyh?
It's not. I agree with those in the map, but in particular, because this is something I've been doing a lot of. Places like the just flying around, places like where Proto Ultima ends up. Well, not ends up, but where you fight whatever Proto Ultima drops in Slyh. That it just seems. It seems like a kind of Coliseum type area, but I feel like there's more to it. There's more to a lot of the places in Slyh. A few places in the Sea of Clouds that are unused.
There's a lot of empty space in the Sea of Clouds.
Sea of Clouds and Churning Mist as well. I feel like we might get a dark scale dungeon in Churning Mist.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting. And Shinjima, no, we're not going to the moon. We're not going to the fucking moon.
No, we are not going. Durgans in space is not happening. Durgans in space is not happening. We're not going to the moon. No, everything will be on Eortia, on Earth, on the earthly plane.
If we're going to the moon, it's with Somnus and a David Bowie soundtrack.
I don't know where else. Probably besides the places you said that we would probably get a new dungeon. It's really kind of open ended at this point. It really is open ended based on the maps and everything. You have a lot of empty spaces that they could use, and we have nothing but time. This is the first patch. Well, yeah, the first patch we just got today. This is the first patch. We have a lot of time. They have a lot of time to develop dungeons. Now, Lord knows how many dungeons we're going to get per patch, and how many of them are going to be recycled. Because I think we're going to see a lot.
What is the first hard mode that you want to see out of any of the dungeons that we did leveling up?
Vault.
Okay, why is that?
How fun was the fucking
and how is that? How would we go back to the vault? Are there going to be some remaining Archbishop sympathizers or Heavensward sympathizers that take control of the vault?
That could be a possibility.
Mm.
I don't see how we can go to the vault. I'm just thinking, in terms of sheer fun factor, it would definitely be fun to go back to the vault, just to see how they could amp it up. What new places, what new areas of the vault we can access. Because we went through the vault without knowing where Almeric was, what part of the vault he was in. There's a bunch of new places we can access within the vault that I would love to see. The library, of course, would be a good one.
Yeah, I want to see a hard mode of the library just to explore some new areas and give them a second fucking chance at not disappointing me.
Right. I was going to say the last two, either the research facility or Fractal Continuum, but I kind of feel like
that would be cool as well. Yeah.
If anything, I'd like to see research facility hard mode. Out of the two. Just to see what other coil mechanics they can put in. Because they're going to just drop more coil mechanics that they just didn't use.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
What about if we can get like one minstrel's ballad sort of hard mode of one of those last story bosses out of the Ascians or out of Thornton. You take Thornton?
I'd definitely take Thornton.
Yeah, I think I'd do the same. I gotta say.
Yeah. It's just such a fucking.
That was so
fight.
epic.
It was epic.
It was so easy, but at the same time, it was kind of really frantic. You know, you were constantly having to do something. You was keeping on your toes. It felt like the stakes were a lot higher than they were.
I don't feel like if they were to ramp it up, I don't feel like it would be much more difficult because it really was so simple. That fight was so simplistic. It felt a little bare bones, but at the same time, I kind of feel like in its simplicity, it got away with a lot because it kind of pulled on our nostalgia strings. It really did. So we kind of looked past the difficulty in all the non-mechanics that were there because there weren't really a lot of mechanics in that fight. Turn away for the Dragon's Eye. Kill ads, that was pretty much it. Stand in where the pillars were, that was it. There really weren't a lot of mechanics for that fight, so I feel like we kind of looked, even though it's a fun fight and it was awesome the way it looked and everything, we kind of looked past the simplicity and it pulled on our nostalgia strings. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'd take the same. I'd like to see both of them, to be honest. I want to see like a difficult Ascian fight because none of them have really been particularly satisfying. And the Ascian Prime is definitely something that we could revisit, whether it's through the Minstrel's Ballad or whether it's like another two Ascians pull a similar trick, or all of the remaining Ascians decide that they're gonna coalesce and have a go at us. Obviously, they wouldn't be for a long time, but yeah, I'd take either. They were both great fights. They're both really, really great fights.
Yeah, it's just that with the content we have now, there's a lot that's open-ended. There's a lot that can be done. Some limited by what is left within story, like you were saying with the Ascians. We can with Ascian Prime, we have a certain amount of Ascians left. We're not going to see Egeorm or Libria. It's going to be two newer Ascians sometime when we're introduced to them. It's all dependent on story. It's all dependent on story and what they want to do with the lore. So, the last little bit of lore that I wanted to talk about was the lore inspired by hunts. You don't get a lot of it, and mainly it's really just S ranks. It's really just S ranks and certain rare hunts.
Even most of the S ranks are not that interesting, to be honest.
One in particular was the story behind Pale Rider. What was the story behind Pale Rider?
So Pale Rider is basically one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. To put it plainly, the Charlanes have got some myth about the Pale Rider appearing at the end of the world and heralding Ragnarok and riding through and killing people, and that's it. That's pretty much the most interesting lore that we've gotten from the S ranks at the moment, which kind of sucks. I mean, we got another one in we got one in the Forelands, which is a giant what is it? Giant griffin, and they literally just tell us, yeah, it's a big griffin. It's a griffin that eats big things, and it's bad. We need to kill it. Like, come on, give us some story about like the king of the griffins or the sort of mythological origins of the griffin. Actually, talking about origins of the griffins, anyone who hasn't noticed it yet, looking at the flavor text or whatever, the griffins are the cavalry of Alamigo. The Alamegans would ride them in a battle in the same way that the other nations ride chocobos. So that's pretty cool. Other than that, I mean, we got Proto Ultima. We got a lot of implications there, but nothing really solid. I know the what's that A rank in the Fallens that you were talking about, Sly?
Was it the Lord of the Wyverns? Let me check.
Lot of the Wyverns, or I think it was Lord of the Wyverns, and you'd expect there to be something there, and there probably is something there somewhere, but I haven't seen it yet, and none of the Hunt Masters or the I should call them the Hunter Scholars are really telling us anything about that. Right. So hopefully we'll get some more.
Yeah, you just didn't get a lot out of the hunt, and I kind of wish there was, because you see instances where you get all these flavor text and everything, but that's it. They just don't play it out to anything else.
It was the same with the sightseeing log this time round. For anyone who's done the sightseeing log, you would have noticed that. Yeah, so you can do it in like an hour. The flavor text, I don't think even one of them tells us something that we haven't heard from somewhere else through main scenario dialogue, which is a bit disappointing. But I don't know. Hopefully, we'll be getting more sightseeing logs with subsequent patches.
That'll be something Happy would love. I mean, I thought the new sightseeing log was way easier. I didn't have to wait on weather a lot or a time of day. I just went to just one of those little lit areas and just looked out, got it. So, I mean, I haven't really looked into the lore of the sightseeing logs. It was just something that I just happened upon when I was out looking for, I don't know, Moogle Quest, looking for Moogle baskets, things like that. Yeah, it was just, would you recommend that someone actually go through the sightseeing log in terms of lore connected to anything?
In terms of lore?
Yeah.
In terms of lore, no.
Okay.
If you're a completionist, then yeah, obviously do it. It's really quick. It only takes an hour. Just do it while you're queuing for something if you want to do it. But if you're doing it and you're expecting to have your mind blown with anything that you wouldn't have heard from somewhere else, or even anything that we haven't mentioned in today's episode, you're not going to be feeling particularly fulfilled coming out of it. Hopefully that'll change. Hopefully we're getting more sightseeing logs. But for now, not much to it.
Yeah, again, something Happy would love to do that I would just do in passing. So, with everything we talked about, any speculation or closing thoughts that you have?
Well, my big speculation that I want to make sure that I have my name on is basically the Garland thing. I'm not sure, but I'm really hoping that the Garland's pushing for that technology in Azazlar is going to be the thing that unites man and dragon and gets us, seeing eye to eye and fighting against a common enemy. And I think that that's the direction that the 3-point series is going to go. Other than that, there's not really much that we can speculate now with the Warring Triad, but I suspect that we're going to find that the Warring Triad was responsible for the third Umbral Era. And that their sort of chaining, their binding by the Allagans will be what ushered in the third astral era and what allowed the Allagans to sort of move forward and build this this amazing empire of theirs. So that's really all I've got. Speculation we haven't really covered. What about you, Slyh? You got anything?
Besides, again, we're gonna free Tiamat. We're gonna free my girl. We're free Tiamat. Free Tiamat. Still gotta get my shirt made. It's gonna happen. Somewhere down the line. I think that's one thing that's definitely gonna happen way down the line. In terms of anything else, yeah, besides Yasmat and Shinryu happening, I don't think I have any other speculations. Eventually, we're going to fight Varys. I think that's going to happen. We're eventually going to take down Varys. Now, it'll probably be closer to the end of Heavensward, but we will take down Varys.
You know who I hope takes down Varys?
Who?
Gaius.
You're thinking Gaius is going to come back and kill Varys?
Gaius isn't dead. He's not dead.
That would be awesome. When it happens,
it will be. It will be awesome.
Oh, you're saying it's going to happen?
He's not dead. He's not fucking dead. I'm not accepting that.
Well, you heard it first. You heard it first, ladies and gentlemen. Gaius isn't dead, and he's going to be the one to take down Varys. We're locking it in today.
And on that cliffhanger.
And on that cliffhanger, Ethys, tell everyone where they can find you, just in case they do not know or they just don't see the Twitter thing right there.
Oh yes, there's a Twitter. It should be right. It's right this time. It's
Yay!
FFXIV.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, Mel, for fixing that. Other than that, my YouTube, you can find me youtube.com/Ethys Asher. I do all kinds of lore videos and speculation and analysis in terms of all the tie-ins, like real world things like we were talking about with the dragons and shit like that. And that's good fun. And I would be much obliged if you would drop in and join this discussion at some point. So that's me. And Slyh, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at Slythefox on Twitter, at Slyh, at twitch.tv/Slyakagreyfox. You can also find me on Instagram at Slyakagreyfox07. And as always, you can find me on Behemoth as Fox Slyh, Plot 14, Ward 5 of the Lavender Beds. As always, Ethys, thank you so much for coming in and schooling us on Final Fantasy XIV lore. Because it's something that not a lot of people pay attention to, because we're just either power leveling or trying to get through it, or we just don't
have enough spare time.
We don't have enough spare time. We have asshole pullers, but yeah, really, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about lore.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been awesome. Rewind, you can come over and clean my room if you like. You know where I live. Blurry Eyes, I'm sure I will be back, and hopefully we'll be doing more Aelzivia on my channel sometime soon.
Yes, we need to do that again, because I need to kind of redeem myself for what happened.
To redeem yourself.
I need to redeem myself for what happened. I failed all of you. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, can I do a real quick shout out just with Rewind in the chat? Lady
Sure.
Rewind, she raids with me. She's my white mage, and she's got a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Lady Rewind. If you want to see me derp gooning, then you'll be able to see that on a raid schedule. I'll be playing. I'll be hanging out in the channel. You can ask me questions if you want. But either way, it's a good fun time. And it's in that weird sort of downtime, which is like 4 a.m. for you, Slyh, when none of the big names are really going, and we're just sort of holding out the graveyard shift. So come say hi sometime.
Do you even know? Like, I am the graveyard shift. I am up at like.
You're every shift, dude.
Yeah, I am every fucking shift. Do you even know?
24/7.
Yeah, like it's weird hours for me. But again, thank you guys so much for coming by, and I hope to see you next week. I have to talk to Happy about what's happening next week. He might be back, but we'll see. But thank you guys so much for coming by, and we will see you then. Obligatory way.
Bye-bye.
We are in post.